world changer is someone who brings the truth of the gospel to people, and it impacts their life, and it impacts their life for eternity.
Pastor Marc Buxton, welcome to GS Stories.
Thank you so much. Good to be here.
How are you, sir?
Doing great. Yeah, doing really good.
That's great to hear. Sir, can you share us a bit of your current ministry?
Sure. Well, I am a church planter primarily. I'm a missionary with Global Surge, and I live in Manila in the Philippines. And I am the pastor of a church in Metro Manila in Marikina City. I pastor Midpoint Baptist Fellowship, a church that we planted about 9 years ago. I also serve as the provost and senior vice president of Global Life University, which is a Bible school and training institution, training many pastors and missionaries and leaders around the world. And a lot of people don't know this, but I'm also a magician. And so I lead a ministry called Honest Deceiver Ministries that uses magic and magic tricks to share the gospel around the world.
So we believe your time is very productive. You're very productive, sir.
Well, I like to think so. I try to do that. I try to be productive in my scheduling and time and find the right balance in all of that.
And how did you get involved with these ministries, sir?
Well, I do believe in calling. I think a calling is very important in ministry, and I believe God has called me to be a missionary and to be a church planter. And so that's how I got involved in those ministries. Each ministry that I'm involved in, whether it's the university or even doing magic or pastoring a church, for me, it's all connected to the church and strengthening local churches and church planting. I believe that's my calling, and so I think a calling's very important. It guides you and gives you barriers to stay inside of as you serve the Lord.
And what is your vision with these ministries, sir?
Well, our vision is pretty expansive. I mean, if you've watched any of these GS stories, you know that at Global Surge, we're all about leadership and we're all about vision. And so we have a vision to plant churches around the world. We have a vision for Global Life University that we could train thousands and thousands of students. Actually, we're expanding now to new countries outside of the Philippines, Cambodia, the United States, Vietnam, other countries. And so our vision there is to continue to train leaders all around the world for the gospel, for the Great Commission. And the same is true for the other ministries that I lead. We just have we believe in growth. I think Rick Warren is the one who said something that's alive is going to grow. And we believe that if your ministry is alive, if it's active, it's going to grow, not only in numbers, but also in spiritual maturity. And so that's our vision. That's what we're trying to do.
And of course, sir, every time that you start a ministry, there would be struggles. How did you overcome those struggles?
Well, that's a very good question, and you're right. There's always trials and struggles in the ministry. And I'll go back to talking about calling. I think calling is very important. The calling will keep you centered, and it will keep you on a foundation. When things get very difficult, if you have a calling from God, then you will not give up. It reminds me of the prophet Jeremiah, and Jeremiah was ready to give up. He had been just made fun of and laughed at, and no one was listening to him. And then there's that famous phrase that Jeremiah writes. I think it's chapter 20 or somewhere around there. And Jeremiah says that he could not quit the ministry because the word of God was like a fire in his heart, and he could not stop. And that was really a calling. It was really what God had called him to do. So when you have a struggle in ministry or you have a challenging time in ministry, you have to go back and remember that it's God who called you to do this. And if you'll do that, it will reignite you. It will refresh you. And then you can push through and continue. And the trials don't last forever. Eventually the morning comes, right? And you find a better time, a better place. So, but I think calling is the key to that.
And sir, since you've mentioned that you've been a church planter, you have numbers of ministries with Global Surge, how did you get involved, or how did you get involved with Global Surge?
So I first really heard about Global Surge, I guess, when our founder, Dr. Greg Lyons, visited my church in the United States. I'm a member of a church in South Carolina, Florence Baptist Temple, and that church supports Dr. Lyons and his ministry, and he came and spoke in our church, and that was really the first time I had heard about what God was doing through Global Surge. And then our church in South Carolina decided to do a missions trip, and there was about 10 or 12 of us that came on that trip, and that was in the year 2008 that I first visited the Philippines, and I came here, and I really saw what the Lord was doing here in Manila, and I was just so overwhelmed and amazed by what the Lord was doing, and that was the time in my life where God began to call me to be a part of what He was doing here. And I surrendered to that and signed up to be a missionary and became a missionary with Global Surge.
And so far, sir, how was it? How was it being part of Global Surge?
Oh, it's great. I would always suggest for any missionary that you have to look for the right team to be a part of. You have to, a missionary should not try to go alone and do their ministry. And that's really what, I think that's the main strength that Global Surge provides to everybody in the ministry, our missionaries, our pastors, our team members, that we're a part of a team. And we say one vision, one team, one vision, and that's true. And the team is an important part of that. So for me, that's probably the biggest thing, that we're not serving alone. We have a team that we work with.
And speaking of that, sir, you posted a few months ago a video where you emphasize how important it is to have a vision in a church and to be in a team with one vision. As a church leader, sir, how did you impart the type of thinking, the type of mindset?
Well, if you're leading a team, I think communication is very important. You have to communicate your vision to them. You have to cascade the vision to them, meaning you have to use different methods of talking to them or communicating visually your vision, and that's very important. Also, when you're casting vision, you need to repeat it. You're going to have to say it over and over again. I think it was Andy Stanley who is famous for saying vision leaks. It's like having a bucket of water and a hole in the bucket, and the water's going to leak out. Vision will leak over time. So what I teach my team, I always say that leadership is reminding. It's just reminding people of what we're doing and why we do it and how we do it. That's really leadership. And so sometimes leadership can be very tiresome because you're just saying the same thing over and over and over again. But that's what we need as human beings. That's what we need as people, is to be reminded by our leaders, this is why we do what we do. And if we communicate in that way, then the vision will stick, and we will move forward and be successful.
So it requires patience.
It requires a lot of patience, you're right. And it's kind of like raising children. If anybody watching this has kids, you have to tell them the same thing over and over and have patience with them and teach them. And that's what leadership is like in a lot of ways.
Was there a time that patience, or that your patience was not enough in casting that vision, sir?
Oh, many times. I don't know if I want to talk about it, though. Yeah, we're all human. I'm human. And sometimes you get very exhausted. Sometimes I've said things. I've said things like, I know I've talked about this before. I know I've taught this before. I know that our team knows this. But then I have to remind myself, leadership is reminding, and I need to be reminded in my life, and I think we all do. And so that's a part of growing as a leader, is learning not to be frustrated, but continue to have that patience even when you may feel like giving up on your team. But we cannot give up because the mission is too important, and we have to continue to move forward.
And since it's a team, sir, there are different types of people in a team. How do you handle casting the vision on different types of people, or despite their differences?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it comes down to relationship. I think you really have to know the people that you work with. You have to know how they will respond. Some people, you just need to tell them one time in a very gentle way. They will get that. Some people, you may need to be a little stronger with them, or a little more direct, or a little more strict with them. Some people, I think everybody needs an example. Every team member needs to see the vision or see what you're talking about. But some people are much more visual. They need to experience what you're talking about, and then they can get that idea. Some people are more willing or more able to learn just by reading a book. You know, a lot of times I recommend a book to my team members, and they will read it and they really absorb that and really understand it. So I think it comes down to relationship. Every person is different, and you have to know your team and lead your team by the specific personality.
And I've heard you talk about relationship, being patient. How important it is that we stand as a team in fulfilling a vision, sir?
Well, I think teamwork in fulfilling a vision is very important. I define vision as the ability to see what could be rather than what is. So a vision is being able to look into the future. And if you want to make something happen, if you want to really change the future, that's what a vision is. You can do that by yourself. You can try to do that alone, but you will not move as fast and you will not go as far as if you work with a team. If you work with a team, then you're going to be able to train others to come along with you in that vision and to help you. And then you get what we call synergy. And the synergy of a team really moves the vision farther and faster than it would on your own. And if we're talking about something as important as the Great Commission, then I think teamwork is a requirement. It's important because we have the most important job in the world, sharing the gospel with people. And if we look at the example of our Savior, Jesus built a team, and he worked with a team. And so teamwork is important as we serve God and help to build his kingdom and reach people.
And how would you encourage our leaders, or our rising leaders, or seasoned leaders to work with a team and fulfill a vision and standing as one, sir?
Well, I would encourage everybody to be a part of a team, and I think the way to unify a team is to cast the vision correctly and to have a clear vision. That's kind of what I talked about in that video, that blog post that you mentioned. Churches that go through, church division or church split or arguments, most of the time those churches are churches that they don't have a clear vision. People are not unified around the vision, and everybody wants to go in many different directions. And so it takes a leader to establish the clear direction and the clear vision. And if you have the right leader doing that, that brings unity to the team. A vision will unify a team. So that's the first thing I would say. You have to make sure you have a clear vision for where you're going. And then you have to have the right people on the team. The truth is, sometimes you may have the wrong people on your team, or the wrong people in the wrong place on the team. The best illustration of that is the illustration of a bus, and I'm sure many people are familiar with that. Leadership is like driving a bus, And your job as the leader is to put your team members in the right seat on the bus. Sometimes a team member is in the wrong seat, and you need to move them to the correct seat so that they can be successful. Honestly, sometimes the team member does not need to be on your bus. They need to be on another bus with another ministry or another team member. And you need to know that as a leader, because you are driving the bus and you're the one in charge of that. And I think if the leader will understand the process of having a vision, making it clear, and having the right team members, they will be successful. They will go far.
And for you, Pastor Mark, what is a world changer?
Well, I think you can define a world changer if we're talking about believers. You're talking about a Christian. We are called to be salt and light in the world. We're called to shine the light of the gospel in a very dark world. And as we do that, as we shine that light, we're able to change individual lives, but also change families and change even communities for good. There's a lot of data, a lot of studies that have shown that Christianity actually can lift a society up, level a society up by the biblical beliefs that Christianity brings. Elmer Towns calls it the redemptive lift of the gospel. That when the gospel comes into a country or even a city and a community, it can actually raise up the level of the life of those people, and that's changing their world for the better. And so I think a world changer is someone who brings the truth of the gospel to people, and it impacts their life, and it impacts their life for eternity.
All right. Pastor Mark, thank you so much for sharing us your wisdom.
Thanks for having me.
We are privileged, sir.
Well, I really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me on. I define vision as the ability to see what could be rather than what is.